Hello there, welcome. I'm Sylvie Steinbach, and today we're going to do a Karmic Astrology analysis of Pope Francis. If you do not know what Karmic Astrology is, it is a specialty in which you're using the natal chart to download the soul's design in its purpose of incarnation today. It means that it allows you to find out what the current life is going to be having as experiences, as well as accessing to the previous life on record, call it a past life if you want, that is going to be coming as a luggage for the individual incarnate to tap into and to be influenced by, knowing that the incarnation today is for evolution purposes. The soul is trying to gain knowledge and experiences through a story. And it ultimately has a goal. And this particular analysis allows you to understand what the goal is. Everything has a logic. Now, in private session, Karmic Astrology sessions are long. They are lasting at least 2 hours. And it can be really difficult to watch a video of me talking for that long. So today I'm going to give you the very important point of this particular individual, Pope Francis. And if you are interested in asking questions, please use the comment section. And if you have some suggestions about personalities you'll be interested to understand in an angle of Karmic Astrology, let me know. I have another video on Donald Trump that is a karmic analysis. So if you are interested, here's a link. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe because we need your support. So let's start with Pope Francis' birthday. So he was born actually in Buenos Aires, Argentina, December 17th, 1936. He is basically Sun Sagittarius with a rising sign in Cancer, and the moon is in Aquarius. In Karmic Astrology, we don't use anything more than that. We have a different approach to using the chart. So I'm going to just tell you what the past life is based on his natal chart. You can draw your own conclusion. I will try not to guide you too much or influence you too much on that. But his previous life probably happened between 1000 AD to maybe 500 AD. It's a very basic lifestyle. Actually, he was born a man at that point, and he had to figure out how to tap into what he was there to do. And in this case, he decided to retreat himself from the world and for the purpose of knowledge, and probably did retreat himself into a structure. It could be a monastery or some kind of school that would allow him to tap into knowledge through books and writings and texts, but also by maybe being around specific teachers. At least I expect him to have had that kind of experience among a very lonely path where he was pretty much away from the world and really tapping into his own self. So this is a life basically of isolation to promote not only learning, but to access to a level of mastery. A master is somebody who has developed an expertise by not only learning, but by transcending those knowledge to make it something that can be attracting followers, people interested in learning from that person. And I expect that at some point in his previous life, that's what he did. He either became a teacher, a preacher, or someone that was used for guidance. And he obviously became recognized in his local geographic area and to somebody who was very well versed. So this is an important idea that sometimes a solitary path can make you an expert, a master. And this is a path that in his previous incarnation, Pope Francis, learned to deal with. It's definitely not based on family, and it's definitely not based on marriage. I expect that he probably became a monk or a priest at some point. Yes, it's connected with some form of religion, but I'm not going to say that it has to be Christianity. It could have been Buddhism. It could have been some other form of worshipping. But there is definitely some spirituality that is religious in nature here. And they show that the entire isolation, the idea of not only learning from ancient texts and people who have acquired certain knowledge, and then spending time alone in isolation, maybe in a chamber, maybe in prayer, was with the purpose of to be able to communicate with the divine. It's kind of like when the soul use a body and an experience of self-sacrifice and knowledge to be in tune with something that is higher than the human itself. And I expect him to have become a preacher with some followers. I also believe that you can call him disciple if you want, but there was the idea that he was able to gather a certain reputation and people were going to see him for advice or for teaching. Because he could teach as well what he has learned and find out through that process of self-learning and prayer and spiritual tuning. And what they show is that he became relatively versed in psychology way before psychology was even created, in understanding about how the humans act and think and find ways to also understand how to help people and how they can become better. So this was a very significant life spiritually because he achieved that level of mastery that he was going for in that previous incarnation. So the idea of having a lot of insights, to not speak a lot, obviously, because when you're by yourself, unless you talk to yourself, you're not going to have a lot of conversation. But even when he was being consulted, he was a man of a few words. So I think that there is a certain depth here in terms of knowing to be very condensed in the way you communicate your knowledge without being frivolous or without wasting time, because at that level of choice of life, anything that is frivolous, anything that is a waste of energy is not conducive to access to the divine. It's all about communication with the divine. It's all about feeling as a soul inside of his body that there is a much more powerful force out there. So the idea that with our past life we bring knowledge in his current incarnation is a very interesting idea, because obviously Pope Francis had already an experience as a religious and spiritual person who reached a certain level of mastery in another life. This life was brought in this current incarnation. It means that all that knowledge, all that development came with him almost intact, even though when I say almost, it just means that he did not remember. So in order to understand why such a choice was put forth, then we have to look at why Pope Francis decided to incarnate in this lifetime. And we have access through the natal chart, again, to that particular plan. And in this case, this is a continuation from the previous life on record. It means that the soul died, may have done some other things in the meantime, and decided to pick it up where it left it and work on its evolution, whatever that may be, by picking up where the soul left it. Is it something that we see often in karmic astrology? No. Continuations are not as common as you may think. And in this case, they show that he decided to come back as a leader. This is no longer about learning from scratch, probably as he did in the previous incarnation. This time we're on a more accelerated path where to be a master is going to take a much faster track in order to go into leadership. What's the difference between mastery and leadership? Mastery is you have reached an understanding of your knowledge that allow you to go beyond what has been taught to you. And what you have been able to develop become the new knowledge that everybody can benefit from. Leadership means that you come to lead others. It implies that you are being put in a position where other people accept to put you forth and to follow what you say. So his chart shows that not only he continues the previous life on record in order to become a leader through his personality. So it's going to happen through his own person. His persona, who he is going to be the reason why he is going to be put in a position of leadership. You can become a leader by being a conqueror. This is not about conquest. It's because of who he is, he's going to become a leader, and he's going to become a leader across borders and countries. And that's what he came to do, to become a leader that goes beyond borders, that people would follow. And the condition here is that this soul will become a leader by being of service. So it's not an ego thing, is I'm gonna be of service for others, but I am therefore put in a position of leadership in order to do that. And also, he's supposed to be of service of a large group of people. How large? If we do karmic astrology analysis, we don't know. We just understand that it could be 150 people, 1,000 people, 100,000 people and beyond. We don't know at this point. What we know is there's a continuation between this lifetime and the previous life, but this is the next level. We now become a leader of a large amount of people, versus the ending of this life was about becoming a master with some followers and people asking for advice. This could be 10 people, 50 people, 150 people, maybe up to 1,000, but no more than that kind of number while he was alive. So now we have this person who not only is basically going to become a leader, but the idea of retreat, going to a monastery or going to a cave or being completely isolated from anybody, maybe leading a life of silence, is not a requirement because it has already been done before. Whatever lesson came with that has been learned. So not only it is about leadership, large group of people, it's worldwide, but it's also about being benevolent and fair. So this person is going to be a leader by being of service and by demonstrating fairness and benevolence while incarnating power. It seems almost like an opposition in terms. How can you be in power and be benevolent and being of service and being fair? Because power corrupts ultimately. So there is something interesting. It means that this person cannot be a king, because kings don't have to be benevolent and they don't have to be fair. So this is not about being crowned a king. It's about becoming a leader by being of service and by demonstrating fairness, benevolence, showing that to the people. And at the same time, if you incarnate power, you're still a representation of laws that must be followed. Or if you don't have laws, you basically have chaos. And at the same time, justice. Benevolence and fairness with guidelines, you can call them laws, and justice. We make decisions based on what can be fair. So that is the reason why he came back, is to accomplish that. And that sounds extraordinary, and because we already know who he is. But if you were to read this person at 18, this might sound like an incredible destiny. And one must wonder how this person is going to accomplish this. So now that we understand what was the past life on record and what was ultimately the soul's purpose in this incarnation, we can now look to see what was shown to the soul that we know of today as Pope Francis, that made that soul decide that this life was the life to live. So let's describe the person that was born in his lifetime before it was Pope Francis as we know it today. And whatever I'm going to say to you, this is things that I would have said to his mother if he was only 1 year old. It doesn't matter, because in Karmic Astrology analysis, things don't change. It is what it is. It's kind of like downloaded something that has already been preset. It's kind of saying that we have certain passages we're going to go through, and we describe those passages. Maybe the between has a lot of free will, but those passages are things we're going to accomplish. And so the personality that was born is of a person that is open-minded, but in a way that is universal, meaning that there is a love for humanity as people that was already there very early on, and an interest that was based on caring for others and emotionally being in tune with his environment. So we are dealing with some little boy that probably had a sense of selflessness, be willing to help out, caring toward people that he didn't know, but just not being caring toward the people that was his family members, but everybody. And also somebody who was capable to listen and to take in cues, silences, non-responses, facial expression, tonality, and get an idea of what this person may have felt. So you could say in some strange way, this person has a natural sense of psychology that was innate. Obviously, it's not innate. It's from a previous life. But this is the personality that was there already at birth. So let's suppose that his mother was interested in having a Karmic Astrology session about her son, that we know today as Pope Francis. what would I say about the career aspect? What kind of work, what kind of predisposition that child would have had? Now, this is interesting because actually this person would have been interested in all science, things that has to deal with technology and universe. Maybe at that time in 1930s, it was a little bit premature to talk about technology as we understand the word today. But at that time, like radios, anything that was to deal with machines, particularly if it had some form of communication or was a very interesting tool that could be used, would have appealed to him anyway. But also the idea that this is somebody who will have been interested in humans. So this is someone who may have contemplating maybe going into learning about psychology, or maybe be interested in helping people, doing a profession maybe that was about being selfless and helping people. Sometimes you find nurses and certain type of helpers that are interested in doing that just because that's what is compelling to them. So obviously, back in the day, we're talking about late 1930s, early 40s, we have the Second World War that is taking place. So it's tough to know exactly how much options he will have had to exercise in order to follow his dreams. But we know that his curiosity and his understanding of the universe as a curiosity field would have led him into maybe taking professions that require doing research or learning, like I said, some form of science. And also with the idea that eventually that choice will change completely when the time comes, because this has nothing to do with the life purpose that we discovered he's here to do, and the idea that there's a continuation between his previous life and this life purpose. So we know that at some point a major change will have happened, something that will have just sidetracked him in a different direction, regardless of whatever studies or whatever job and work he will have had. And that is one thing I will have looked at it. Now, the second thing I will have looked at is his ability to take care of himself. Today, it's about money. And I think back in the day, probably money was also important, even though it may not be as exclusively important like it is today. So if his mother would have asked me the question, I would have said, by the way, I believe that he is going to do extremely well. There is definitely not only a protection about his financial situation, but it's also the idea that he could do so well that he will not need to work. The problem is there is a condition. And the condition is for this prophecy to take place, it can only happen once he has fulfilled his destiny. Once he fulfills his destiny, he doesn't have to work for a living. So this is a very strange way of talking to a mother. It can be perceived as talking in tongue, but it must be actually say the way it is. That's actually the message. So I want you to remember those few concepts I just shared here. And I want to look at his ability to communicate with others. Because in the world of humans, you need to have an idea of how this person fare dealing with relationships and communication. So this is somebody who is very sensible and very in tune with the power of language. He's very refined. He's very well written and very well spoken, thoughtful and insightful with his choice of words. It's a talent that is there from birth. Of course, it has been learned from the previous past life on record. Again, still a man of few words and a mediator at heart, which means this is somebody who believes in communicating with opposite parties and trying to find a solution. And when he's on that mission, he's able to listen. And when he says something, he chose his word very carefully. and they pay out. People tend to listen. So he has that talent. When it comes to his creativity is channeled through his actions. For example, creativity can manifest in an artistic way, but sometimes creativity can be manifest into building things. Believe it or not, there's quite a bit of engineers out there that are creative and psychics, and that's how sometimes they find how to create new parts. But there's also creativity in how you do things, particularly if you are trying to solve problems. You just get ideas, you apply them, they work. That's action. So he's not automatically an artist at heart, although I do believe that he may have an appreciation for it. His own creativity has to deal with the field and how to do certain things. You can say he's a problem solver, which go back to the mediator aspect. And he is very solution driven with an ability to adapt, and he's capable to explore new things for the experience of it. And also he's willing to feel. This is not a person who is afraid of feelings. This is somebody who's willing to try to experience some things that he has not done before, because he's an explorer by heart. He's curious. He wants to see how he's going to be feeling when he does it. So he is not a cold person inside. He is not somebody who doesn't feel deeply. But sometimes, you can be perceived because of what he brought from his previous life, his ability, ability to teach, for example. He still has that. Well, can make him sometimes come across as a little bit rigid. But it's because he's not somebody who likes to chit-chat. This is the way he speaks, he's influential, he's substantial, and he has to find those ideas, those words. And sometime when you have a teacher that operate in that fashion, it can make you perceive a little bit more austere and more rigid than you really are. I'm sure from time to time it's not perceived that way, but at the same time he is capable of that kind of perception. Sometime he will feel restricted in life. He will be restricted because he may feel a certain way about a situation, but he can't act on it, or he cannot talk about it that way. So there sometimes can be a battle between the facade, or what is being said, and then what he really feels inside. I think he can restrict his emotions in the way he speaks, but it's hard. It's not, because I said he feels a lot, and he is a doer. He is creative by action. If it's just to do a speech or to say something, it can get sometimes very frustrating, because this is somebody who would prefer to be on the field and do something there. So it is important to understand that we are dealing with someone who is way ahead of his game very early on when it comes to his knowledge. So he's not here to learn more. He's just here to catch up on the previous knowledge. So he's going to go into an accelerate mode of accomplishment. This previous life took him a lifetime. Now we're talking about maybe 10, 15 years of learning, and he's done. Meaning he caught up on everything. Everything feels familiar. This is concept he understands already because he studied them, even though he doesn't understand that. But it is more like repeating a class that you already done. You may find some details you missed the first time around, but a lot of the concepts are very familiar to you, and so it's not something you have to learn. You just know them. And that's exactly what this individual will feel on his journey to his destiny. So the question is, well, if he has a destiny, well, what it is. And it's interesting, if sometimes the answer is not just the career. Sometimes you have to look at the personal life. And his personal life, he was born in a family that was very action driven to begin with. They were doers. So he learned that doing also when he was raised by those people. And it's kind of like if there is a motto in that family, it's like, we do things here, we go out there, and we do things out there. It's not intellectualized, it's practical. It's, we use our hands, we do the things ourselves. There's nothing of a scholar childhood here. However, there's also the idea that this man, very early on, get a taste of community life. It means that probably he was born in a family that has maybe many children, that he may, through his teenagers, and early adult life, had to share the quarters with other people. But this kept going. Learning to live in community where you are maybe sharing your living room because it's a community dining room, or because you're sharing the same room and two other people are sleeping there. That notion of having a community life doesn't seem to be conducive to a love life, like being in a couple relationship or to have your own family, because that community life is strictly shown in his chart as being co-ed, or what you want to call it is when you have roommates or when you live in in a place where you're sharing your quarters, but it's not about love life. And his actual love life is shown as almost non-existent, which means that the individual, by the time they reach adulthood, and let's go with the idea that you really become an adult at 28. And if you want to say, well, we become an adult at 21, 22, that's fine. We tend to believe that you have to get your Saturn return at 28 to finally step into adulthood in astrology, but let's go with the 22 years old kind of landmark. It means that by the time this person reach adulthood, if there was any love relationship, there were very few, maybe one, maybe two, nothing more than that. It becomes literally inexistent by the time in his 20s. And usually, the relationships that are shown in his chart are interpersonal, which means having relationship with your clients, or socializing with friends, or socializing with your students, or socializing with your colleagues. That's interpersonal relationship, but it's not romantic, it's not sexual. There is plenty of those type of interpersonal, intellectualized relationship, sex life with somebody, the love life, the couple, like I said, absolutely non-existent, and that usually is translated traditionally in astrology as a life of celibacy, or people who basically become celibate by choice or by default. And that doesn't mean that this individual doesn't like women. Actually, I would say that Pope Francis probably do like women a lot, but not automatically in the way you think. I think that he's pro-woman because he sees women as the ultimate representation of God's work. There is a certain view of the woman as, the Virgin Mary, that is very strongly idolized by him, that makes him really worship woman's ability to guide the world, or to be a representation of a higher power. So this is obviously somebody who see women as wife and mothers. It's not really about sex. It's like I said, it's not his motivation. But it's very interesting that even though he is pro-woman, he's not really emotionally attracted to them on a one-on-one. It's not, he's not emotionally in tune with women. It's the spiritual aspect of women that he likes very much, but he's not in tune with their emotions. It's very interesting. So there may be an explanation here sometime, certain things he said versus certain things he does. So ultimately what we have now is, if we summarize really, we have somebody who is going to do international teachings, who is born with some, and the reason why I say international teaching is because he's supposed to be a leading person that is going to be followed, and we know it has a continuation with the previous life, so we know it has to be some form of teaching or some form of preaching of some form, but on a large scale. And at the same time, we know that in his career aspect, that sometimes something happened, and then he could decide to do that continuation of his previous life. And if that's the case, it means that whatever he has to do prior to that, whatever he has done, he will change a job, he will change a career, and decide to become somebody who either could be a spiritual teacher, or somebody who decide to become a religious scholar, maybe even somebody who become a spiritual spokesperson, or somebody who decide to teach spiritual or religious field. And this is a modern way of interpretation of what kind of change in the career he could make. And there is in the chart always an area that I call the pain and suffering. And we all have it. It's different from one person to another. And that pain and suffering is not about eliminating it. It's about understanding how to live with it. And I normally use the metaphor of Jesus carrying the cross and a few people offering their help to carrying it for him, and him refusing to have help. You have to carry your cross until the end. And the analogy here is that that section of the pain of the suffering is something that we have to learn to accept. And we're carrying it till we move on. And in his case, the pain and suffering in his chart is shown by the exact idea of continuation from the previous life. So to understand what it means to have pain coming from the actual continuation from the learning in the previous life on record and the fulfillment of the life purpose, it's because he had already developed a spiritual knowledge or religious understanding, and now he has to take it to the next level, which is bringing it to the masses. And sometimes it's not an easy task. It can feel very restrictive, and it may have to go through a protocol that is extremely structured, and not as maybe free as the previous life was. And sometimes it can lead to manage negative emotions, and that's what I believe can be sometimes the difficulties of going through this current life pattern, is to manage them. Now, I will go briefly over the Pope's health. He is showing in his chart that he has respiratory restrictions and potential growth in the lung and larynx area, which is around the throat, the lungs. And this can lead sometime to obstruction of the respiration. So he may be prone to respiratory diseases or inflammation or situations that can restrict and have that kind of effect. This is something I believe everybody has a weak point in their health. Sometimes it's genetic, sometimes it is created at birth, sometimes people go through diseases that leave their marks on the body. So it's something that is there. It doesn't mean that it is life-threatening. It just means that this is something he will have to deal with throughout the course of his life. And of course, the medical progress in this area or where he lives could improve those conditions. But it can also be complications later on when you get older. His life force is, very, very strong. And so he can overcome those issues unless it were to go into the brain region, which is one of the complications sometimes when you have infection, for example, and that could be a more dangerous effect. Now, I usually do not give normal prediction when I do karmic astrology because it's about the chart activation. It has nothing to do with doing cards or kind of reading somebody's the next few weeks. So activation means that it's not when an event happened, it's when it is felt by the person I am reading the chart of. So just bear that in mind. So we're going to go into 2020, and the only reason why we're doing 2020 is because it is an activation year for the Pope. It shows some health issues that will be activated this year. And at the same time, the Pope will act as a mediator that is either because of an international crisis involving health issues, or any kind of migratory displacement like immigration, exiles, and the well-being and the welfare of the people being displaced. This will translate into visiting camps or an area that looks similar to some region that he has had his previous life on record. So, for example, he may visit countries where the weather and the fauna and the vegetation is extremely raw, dry, desert type, or with very little humidity. His emphasis will be, of course, about suffering and the idea of migration, which is people leaving one region because they cannot feed themselves properly to another, or sometimes because of war. Is it really unusual? No, but it may be that during this year a story will break out involving the Pope, and it will be interesting to see what country is involved with that, because it may tell us that either the country have something to do with his past life, or the region, because countries have changed since then, the region may have something to do with his past life. Then we're moving on to 2023. There's a shakeup or suddenly a situation that will take place in the church or in the environment of the church in Rome that will have altering effects. And the Pope, obviously, because he is the leader of the church, will have to speak about it or act as the leader or do something about it. So we'll know about it. 2024, the Pope will be subject to negative press. Negative press means criticism that could be quite acute, or attacks, literally, due to his stand on certain topics or lack of stand on certain topic. So it seemed that 2023 and 2024 are 2 years of very active, negative energy around the Pope, either sometime due to the church revelations or certain activities, or it could be a scandal again, or it could also be that the Pope is not really handling it the way it should be, and this is opening the door for a lot of criticism. Then we're going to move on to 2025. It seems that he is going to take a more active approach with his role that will be more significant as a spiritual leader. So he may do a world tour, he may have some international visit where he speak in a way where it's being noted. I expect maybe a possible significant publication that is more spiritual toward his religion. And so it could be something that has to deal with an empowerment type of book that is supposed to spiritually enlighten people who read it. It could also be something that is a personal project of his that is, of course, still linked with spirituality and religion. But the idea is for him to maybe put a little bit more of his own personal approach to religion, and in this case, the Catholic Church. So this is what Karmic Astrology is about, and like I said earlier, it does not change. It is what it is from the very beginning of life to the end of it. I will stop at 2025 because I don't want to go any further, but activation do come from at different years or different cycle. So sometime it's short in timetable, like here we're covering 5 years. Sometime it can go into significant 10 years to sometimes even 15 years ahead prediction. Sometime I share with the client. So if you are interested in the Karmic Astrology and you would like to have a session for yourself, you need to contact me through my website. And it is sylviesteinbach.com. You can also contact me through my email address, sylviesteinbach@yahoo.com. So what do you need to be able to do a Karmic Astrology analysis? Of course, the birthday. That's an easy one, right? But most importantly, the exact birth time, which can be a challenge for some people. And that's the reason why I will not do such a session if the time of birth is not known or is approximate, even within a half an hour approximation. I will not do anything that is based on hearsay, which is, well, my mother told me I was born at 6 p.m. because I have found out often than not that it was not matching what was on the birth certificate or the birth health book that some countries give to mothers when they come out of the hospital. So if you said to me, I'm born between 12 and 1 or 12 and 12:30 p.m., it won't work. I can't do this particular analysis for you. The birth location, that is easy. I can do any kind of country. So if you are born in another country, don't be afraid. You can definitely get this session done. Now, what we do with those three information, a birthday, an exact birth time, and a birth location, we create what was shown in that video is a natal chart. And the natal chart is not a very comprehensive thing for people who are not astrologers, but with all the proper information on it, you can bring that chart to another astrologer and they will be perfectly fine because they will know exactly how this chart was built. And this natal chart is basically a map of the planet at the time of your birth and their relationships with each other. So once we have that chart, this is what we're going to use to do our analysis. So the information in the chart is downloaded as if we were putting a disk or a software in a computer. And suddenly we have the entire information coming down on our screen. It takes 2 hours. Sometime it will go over. But my session's price is set for that excess if it's needed. But I need to be looking at a 2-hour session fee in order to basically pay for my time and also for the work that is taking place before we start the session, like creating a natal chart. You can do that session over the phone, through Skype, or in person. I do email the chart to you once it is done, and you must record your session. So what happens if you call, then you need to have either a landline and a cellular that will record for you, and you can put me on speaker if you want. Or if you are using Skype, there is a way, I think, to record, but with Skype it changed from time to time, so don't take my word for it, but I have clients who have done that. Or you can use calling me on the cell and have a digital recorder or record it through your computer, but you will have to have 2 devices basically in order to ensure that you do record, because it's a lifetime reading. We don't do it again. There is no update in such a session, so it's really a lifetime, and you need to be able to access to it 10 years later or 20 years later. Some of the first karmic analysis I've done are from 35 years ago, so you can imagine that it was done on tapes. Thank God we don't have to worry about tapes. We can do on digital and not worry about running out of the tapes. So take advantage of it. Make sure that you do record. It's very important. And just book through my website a time and date that is suitable to both of us. You will see my business hours there. And you can give me your information via a little area in the booking system that allow you for communicating your information. And as long as I have your phone number and your email address, if I need more information, I need to reach out, which I will reach out anyway, then we'll be all good for that particular exceptional session. It's an exceptional session because the information downloaded is coming from a higher level of consciousness. So it tends to, the 2 hours tend to go very fast. And if sometime it go beyond 2 hours, people are very surprised that, for example, they have been here for 3 hours and it's like time has disappeared. So how accurate this is really? Because at this point we have no proof about past life. We have no proof that whatever I'm going to tell you is going to happen. Well, you're correct. And I think that you need to be aware, and if you are in your 20s and 30s, whatever I'm going to say, if it doesn't fit into what you're projecting you're going to do in your life, it may create a lot of friction because you don't have to believe what I'm going to say. And it's fair enough. That's why I want it to be recorded. It may come to be very useful 15 years later. However, there are certain things I will tell you, even if you're in your 20s and 30s, that could be very useful about how to handle your life and why certain things have happened so far. Now, if you are, of course, 75 years old, your life, most of your life is already behind you. So you are able to confirm or say, no, it didn't happen, because you have already went through it. And that's how I know it's accurate, because my oldest clients were 85 years old and the reading was almost 96% accurate. It was little details that was not exact, but everything else was right on the money. And so I had some few clients that were in their 60s, 70s that were able to confirm, even if it happened sometime in the later part of their life, they were able to confirm this was actually right on the money, to a point where sometimes it can get a little bit scary depending on your belief system, because we are told that you can't do this, it's not possible to do this. And then when somebody is able, that doesn't know you, able to pinpoint exactly how your life did take place, it kind of make people nervous to a point where they laugh, they don't know what to say. And after that, when we talk about the feedback, because I allocate in my session enough time afterward to be able to have a feedback with you, they tell me they did not expect it. And so it sometimes takes them by surprise. So be aware that there's a reason why it's a lengthy session. It's 2 hours of me doing most of the talking. The feedback can sometimes run over, but that's okay because I won't charge you for the additional discussion. It's all need to be a flat fee for the 2 hours. So if you have any questions regarding this modality, you can leave a comment if you feel like the response could be appreciated by other people. If you want to be more personal, then contact me through email. I do not usually respond through phone. So if you call and you leave a message, I will still not call you back because unfortunately I'm very busy. I may leave you a text, but it's better if you email me because I do respond to my email almost every day. So I hope you have enjoyed this particular session with me on Pope Francis. Time will tell how accurate it was. And as I mentioned before, we have one on President Donald Trump. So if you're interested, there is a link in the section for the presentation of this particular video. I wish you the best for 2020. Take care. Bye-bye.